Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for day one in a week-long Winter Wonderland video series featuring Penny Black's newest scenic stamps. And the stamp featured in today's video is 40-872 Winter Barn. A stunning, beautiful stamp. I'm so excited to share these cards. Now, in this series, I'm sharing two cards featuring these scenic stamps. The first is a simple non-painting technique, and the second card is a layered painted design. So in this first technique, or this first card, it requires no watercoloring and it features a simple classic style. So it's really easy to do, but still really beautiful. So I am stamping onto Bristol smooth cardstock. And I have my paper cut at the 5x7 size, but the finished cards are 4¼ by 5½ inch, so a standard size card. I love using this paper for both techniques because it is very smooth and it captures the beautiful detail that are a part of these stamps. So on this first card, I'm just stamping this using my ink pads. I'm not adding any water or any blending. Going back in, and I'm working section by section in a MISTI stamp positioning tool. This allows me to layer up the different colors one by one and restamp things if I want to darken it up. So I'm just starting here with this tree that's up in the foreground, and I inked that with some brown ink. I'm using Ranger Archival inks for this, mainly because one, I love the colors, and second, the size. So they're the mini size, which allows me to sort of tip and turn that ink pad and get it just where I want it. But I do keep an eye out. If I ink something up and say, for example, I get this blue onto the barn, I just use my finger like you're seeing me do there and just wipe it away off the stamp. You could also have a little paper towel handy if you don't want your fingers to be covered with ink like mine. So you can see here, I'm just working in these different sections and stamping it down, and look at that beautiful scene coming to life there in the background. I love with these stamps, everything is built in for you. The depth, the road leading to the background, the fence, the tree in the foreground, the barn back there. It's so beautiful all together. Penny Black has done all of the work for you in making the scene look finished and complete. Now I do sometimes add more than one layer. So on that barn I started with a lighter red, and then I just on sections of the barn up near the top I added a little bit darker red. And you can also pull in your markers. So I'm grabbing some Tombow dual brush pens just to add a little bit of shading to that barn. You certainly wouldn't have to, but these will help you sort of pinpoint and get right on the stamp where you want it to go. Now, the reason I don't do the whole thing in markers is you can get more even coverage with an ink pad, especially to large areas of your stamp using an ink pad, because you're just patting it right on there and it's a flat surface to a flat surface. With a marker, you're brushing it on, so you are going to get some of those strokes of the marker when you put it onto your stamp. So it's a little bit less even when you go to stamp it onto the paper. So I try to use ink pads as much as I can and marker just for the tiniest little areas that I can't get very well with an ink pad, or if I want to add just a little bit of shading, like I added that little bit of darker area to the barn, or like the roof line here. Now all of the exact colors of everything I'm using will be down listed for you in the YouTube description box. All the supplies, inks, markers, papers, paints, and of course the Penny Black stamps will be listed and linked to our online store down in that YouTube description box below as well. So you can see there I stamped the whole road with the blue ink pad, then I went in with the blue marker and just kind of added a little few darker areas to that. I can do the same thing with the tree. I can pick up that brush, kind of turn it on the side and use a sweeping motion on the stamp, and I can darken up a few of those branches and the trunk using that. And that's that simple. Now to finish off this simple card, I used our Stitch Circles die, as well as a sentiment from our new transparent set 30-919 Meaningful, and I just layered that circle die over the top of that stamping that I did to sort of spotlight just one section of the card or the image that we stamped. And I just love that sort of very classic look. Now, this second technique with the same stamp, it adds a little bit of watercoloring and stamp layering for an artsy but a very doable finished card. So again, I'm still working on the Bristol Smooth Cardstock, and I'm using my stamp positioning tool, but I'm going to also do some masking. So I've put down there a piece of Eclipse masking paper. It didn't really need to be that big, I realize now watching myself do that. This is just like a giant sticky note, and I'm going to just stamp this first and set it aside. You'll see me bring it back in a little bit later. I don't need to stamp the whole image. I really only need sort of that horizon line and up and around that barn. So that's why I'm not stamping the whole thing. Now I'm working on the actual sort of card itself. So I am still using a little bit of my ink pads just on this horizon. And I'm doing this, I want to get that horizon line stamped. This is an Archival ink, so it is waterproof. It's not going to bleed and blend. And then I'm going to paint my sky. So I don't have to go back in and paint around every little tree branch that's going to be going across there. And so I've just used a Distress ink re-inker. I'm going to use that as my watercolor. I put it on an acrylic block there off to the side. I have kept everything in the MISTI, so I have not moved the stamp or the paper that I'm stamping on. I do have a little piece of double-sided tape underneath my paper just to keep things from sliding around, and it kind of kept the magnets from being in the way of where I was stamping. And I am just going to paint this sky. Because I'm going to be using some water-soluble stamps and inks as we move forward, I wanted to have this sky done so that when if I didn't, when I went to paint the sky, all those other things that I'm stamping might start to bleed and blend. So sometimes it's just easier to get that sky done by stamping just that horizon line. I know where to stop it, where to stop that sky. So I'm just getting that added in there. Now I will make sure that's dry, and now I will go on to inking up and stamping some more of this image. Again, I'm working section by section, and here I am using Distress ink pads. This is a water-soluble ink, which means I can go back with my paintbrush and just a little bit of water and blend this after I've stamped it. So you can see here, I can just go in right after I've stamped that and blend it, and it just gives it a touch more of a painted watercolor look. One thing I love in particular about this stamp, if you look at these branches reaching across, the snow on the branches is built into the illustration. So just a little touch there that I love to point out about this stamp that really gives it that realistic look. So you can see here I'm just adding a tiniest little touch of water in a few spots and letting that blend. Now you can see why it was very helpful to have that sky painted already so that all of that didn't bleed and blend when I went to do the sky. So here I'm going in on the barn. I'm using a Distress ink pad in the mini size. Again, it helps me get it onto the barn, swiping away any little bits of red with my finger that I went where I didn't want it to go. I've stamped that, and now I can grab my paintbrush. I just dip it into some water, then I pat it a little bit onto a paper towel before coming to the paper so it's not too wet. And here you can see I can just sort of blend that out, get a looser, softer look. If you like more detail, don't add the water or add very little water. If you want it to look really loose and watercolory, add more water. Now, another thing I love about these stamps is you don't have to use all the parts of the stamp. So see here, I haven't stamped the road or the fence yet. That actually looks very beautiful like that without those other elements. Say you wanted to make a scene and you only wanted to add a barn to your scene and you were using some other tree stamps. You could do that if you're using a stamp positioning tool. You could just ink up and stamp the barn where you want it to be. Or maybe you just want that tree coming over the side of your image and you want to add some critters underneath it, you can do it just by using parts of these stamps. So with these scenic stamps, you get the whole scene, everything is done for you and ready to go, but you also are kind of like getting a barn stamp, a tree stamp, a fence stamp, a road stamp that you can use on their own as well. Now I did add a little shading to that barn using some markers. I used the Tombow markers on that and then just blended them out as I needed to. And here on these smaller areas I'm using the markers and those are water soluble. So again, I can go in with that paintbrush and blend them out. The key for me is using this Bristol smooth paper because it really helps you blend it out, and also doing it pretty quickly after I've stamped it while those inks are still a little bit wet and sort of sitting on the top, very top of that paper and not totally soaked in. Here I am adding some color to the road and a little bit of that snow shadow up by the barn. And then after stamping that, I can just go back and blend it with that water. Again, dipping my paintbrush in my cup of water and patting it on a paper towel so that it's not too wet or blobby when I head onto the paper. These scenes are really, really so fun to paint. You just feel like I'm making a masterpiece here, and they're very easy to do. So I know the first one was very clean and simple and didn't require any painting, but I really encourage you, if you are if you think you can't do this, actually try and give it a try. Just follow step by step, do a few of them, practice, and it becomes it's actually quite easy to do, and you're going to feel like really good about yourself as you do them. So one of the things I love about stamping is I don't draw, but I love that with stamps I can create such beautiful scenes and still have the creativity of picking the colors and working with them, trying them lots of different ways. I did decide to add a little bit more of the blue up in the sky, not too close to those other branches, because when I stamped it down on the road, it was like a little bit brighter than the sky. So I wanted to pull that brighter blue up into the sky. So I just pressed that ink pad on my acrylic block and picked up a little bit of that blue. So the top part of the card, the sky, was tying into the bottom part on that road. Here I'm using my Tombow dual brush pen onto the fence post. Or onto the fence, all parts of the fence, and a little bit over there, and I will stamp that down. And then again, I can pick up my paintbrush if I want to. Certainly don't have to, just depends how much detail you want. And then I can just lightly paint over the top of that to blend it. And now you could certainly stop here, but I wanted to show you some other ways that you can keep creating with these stamps, these scenic stamps, that they are really limitless in what you can do with them. So I'm going to pull in the little tree here from our 30-261 Nature's Friends stamp set. This is a great stamp set to accompany any of these scenes. And here's that mask that we stamped at the very beginning. I trimmed out just along that horizon line and up over the barn. It's on that Eclipse masking paper, so it's like a giant sticky note, like I said. And I've covered up that bottom part of our painting. Everything is dry. And now I'm going to stamp some trees sort of off in the horizon. So for me, if I'm using this as a Christmas card, I do like the idea of a little bit of red and a green on it. So I had that red barn and I just really wanted to add some green trees. I'm stamping these again using that Distress ink, so it is water soluble. And then I'm just blending it out with my paintbrush and some water afterward. I'm going to use the same tree, just kind of stamp it along this horizon line. This gets really fun. So when you start adding some different layers in and changing up what the image looks like, it's really fun to start sort of designing these scenes yourself. And I'm kind of using some different shades of green so that I didn't have sort of just this blob of green in the background. Now you saw in this Nature's Friend set, it also has some little animals. You could add those in the foreground or in the background. So it's just lots of fun. And cutting out this mask was very, very easy to do because it's just that one horizon line and a little bit up and over the barn. So I don't like cutting really intricate masks, but for the scenes, they're actually very easy to do. And I'm just continuing to work my way down with these evergreen trees and then blending that out so that those have that same watercolor look as the rest of the card. And here I will add another. I also vary the heights of these trees so that it's not just, it's just a little bit more realistic. Can layer them on top of each other. And I'll get one more in here. And blend it out with the water. And you can see when I remove that mask, isn't that fun? That's like the most satisfying feeling to remove that and see what you have created. And I keep those masks stored with my stamps because you can reuse them until the stickiness is gone. Now, I just decided to pull a tiniest little touch of that green over here onto the right hand side of the card. So I just pressed that ink pad to my acrylic block, picked up a little bit of that ink and added a touch of it there. And here's just some white acrylic paint, and I'm going to pick that up with my paintbrush and add some snow to the scene. So you could splatter this, you could water it down and just splatter it onto your card, but that, I don't know, I have splatter anxiety. So I find it's just easier to pick it up and put a few dots on there. You could also use a white gel pen to do this as well, and you don't have to either. It looks beautiful without it too. So I'm just adding it in there. It also is a great way if you have a spot where the stamping or the shading didn't quite go as you liked, you can put some snow on top of it and hide it. So I'm just adding that in. And that is the last step to this. Again, this is a standard size card, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And I will give you a look here at the completed card. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Like I said, this is a video series, so we have 5 more videos to go, I believe, this week. So don't miss out on any of those. Ring that bell by the subscribe button so you get a notification every time the new video is posted. Thanks so much for watching, and happy stamping.